1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you live from NASA Community College 90.3 WHPC, streaming live on the college station, the iHeart app, and the iTunes.com. This program is reposted and archived on Spreaker.com. And of course, good news, we are rebroadcasted Sunday evenings at 11 p.m. So you're listening at that time. Thank you for joining us so late in the night, and good morning to everybody. Oh, by the way, this is Rabbi Pearl. You know, the word bigotry is bad. And I must tell you, no matter who the victim. When it comes to racism, America has made it clear that prejudice based on color cannot be tolerated. Fine. Roseanne Barr destroyed her career with just one racist Twitter and had to be removed from her own show for the transgression of her offensive comment. Equality is in. Demeaning stereotyping is not only out, but seemingly bad enough to be deemed unforgivable. Except when one group is the target. What normally dare never to be said in polite and civilized society appears to become now permissible and sadly even laudable. When directed against no less than half of the population, a group with I would say, intellectuals and professionals and journalists assure us deserve universal condemnation. What am I talking about? Who are these terrible people exempt from the sin of stereotyping? And you're going to be really surprised what I'm about to say. They are the men. Those terrible, evil representatives of the human race who are all beasts and pigs, rapists in hiding, sexual harassers, and violent perverts. We all know the meaning of the word racism, but have you heard of the word misandry? Well, let me tell you. It refers to the collective hatred of men, the conviction that everyone of the male gender deserves to be vilified, ostracized, and even hated. Simply put, their sex condemns them to female damnation. Now, do you think I'm exaggerating? I'd like to share with you some of the misandry spokeswomen. And this is from a quote from Andrew Dworkin. She says, "I want to see a man beaten to a bloody pulp with a high-heeled shoved in his mouth, like an apple in the mouth of a pig." Sharon Stone says, "The more famous and powerful I get, the more power I have to hurt men." And then from another, Sally Miller, in an article called "The Future, If There's Anyone is female, the proportion of men must be reduced to and maintained to at approximately 10% of the human race." You know, that sounds like. As long as some men use physical force to subjugate females, all men need not. The knowledge that some men do suffice to threaten all women. He can beat or kill the woman he claims to love. And it goes on to things. This is from another lady called Marilyn French. And she says, "The vast majority of men in the world do one or more of the above." And of course, she goes through this list of terrible things that I just mentioned. I could go on with many, many lists of things. These are, in some cases, and have been, successful women whose views are still being covered by respectable publications. These are women who have lectured on college campuses across the country. Can you imagine what would happen to men who express their similar sentiments about the opposite sex? And can you explain the differences, misandry, from the most extreme form of racism? You know, in our world, we've just began the remarkable narration of the creation of the world as we begin the rereading of the 5 books of Moses, starting from Bereshit. And crucial to this story is the theme of human equality. Equality of all races and the equality of both sexes, men and women. The Talmud tells us, only one person was originally created for the sake of peace amongst human beings, so that no man should be able to say to his fellow man, my father is greater than your father. And when God took from the dust of the earth to create Adam, he took dust from every corner of the earth, so that all of humanity shares its essence. God also stated it's not good for a human being to remain alone. And the Medrash tells us, when God was about to create woman from Adam, he considered from which part he would fashion Eve. He said to himself, if I make her from his head, she will end up being haughty. If I make her from his lips, she will be a tattler of tales. If I make her from his heart, she will be guilty of envy. If I make her from his feet, she will be stepped upon and feel inferior. God says, he concluded, I will use Adam's side so that they will always stand side by side as equals. You see, hatred is a horrible transgression, and the Torah took note of it at the very beginning. It is time for us to eradicate it in all of its forms. From a biblical perspective, there is no room for both racism and misandry. Both of these distortions forget the ultimate truth that all of us share. And what is that? Guess what? I know. Please sit down. I'm about to give you something very surprising. Something rather, how would you call it? Politically incorrect. And what is that? Shh, I'm saying it quietly. We are all created in God's image. Yeah, it's the best kept secret. Looking around the way things have been going on, you would think that it doesn't exist, but that is the truth. We are all created in God's image. Now, I must tell you something. In recent days, at our synagogue, we come together on Saturday morning at 9:15, and we have an open discussion and learning. And the question is, this time of the year when we read about the creation of the world from Genesis and it's how it unfolded, the question always comes up, how old is the universe according to Judaism? What is the Jewish view on this age-old question? Well, the short answer is, we can't tell how old the universe is by examining it because we don't understand how it got here in the first place. But let me give you a little bit more on this. A colleague of mine was working on selling ads for his yearly calendar, and he approached a local store owner with a form and a copy of last year's edition. He showed her the beautiful full-color layout and all the Jewish pictures and the art spreads throughout the pages. When she finished flipping through it, she stops and asks, what is the number 5778 on the front? And the young man quite simply said, well, that's the amount of years since creation. There was silence. You're not serious, she says. She wasn't sure if this young rabbi still lived in the Dark Ages or was completely in denial. And he was now asking her to trust him with her money to buy an ad in this calendar for this year. The truth is, there is no 30-second soundbite that would be able to answer this millennium-old question of how old the world is. So the young rabbi, what did he do? He went back, put his thoughts on paper, and dropped it off at her business later on. Because really, you could say to yourself, have you ever heard of carbon dating? Aren't there stars 1 million light years away? Hello, have you ever heard of the word dinosaurs? I mean, I myself have gone, my wife and myself like to go to museums, and we went to, as our summer vacation, we took a day off and we went to the American Museum of History, of Natural History in Manhattan. And what welcomes you when you walk in over there? A dinosaur. I'm not talking about the person taking your ticket, your money. I'm talking about the things hanging right across the whole big hallway there. So where do they come from? Dinosaurs. It's kind of hard to believe in the Torah when you get stuck on the validity of the first chapter. Better yet, on the first sentence. God created the heavens and the earth. Come on. Well, I ask you to clear your mind and give me a second to present my case. Let us take things at face value. God created the world at 6 days. Adam and Eve are standing around in the Garden of Eden. Now, what does that garden look like? Remember, the world is only 6 days old, and the grass was created on the third day. Was it a garden? A field with seeds? Small little buds looking like a nursery? Doesn't seem too exotic or paradise-like. On that train of thought, when they ate from the tree, how was their fruit if it was only 3 days, 3-day-old tree? How many rings were in that tree? Oh, wait. How did Adam and Eve reach to get it? Or for that sake, even walk? If they're only 2 hours old, right? All this happened in the last quarter of the day. So they were just created, and suddenly they're walking around eating fruit. And that snake, oy gewalt, how old was the snake? He was 2 years old. Boy, did he grow up fast. We must be missing something here. When you sit down and start reading your favorite novel, let me give you this example. Right? You open up your book. Oh, sorry. Who opens any books anymore? I guess I'm the dinosaur today. Well, you sit down and you start reading your favorite novel. The first chapter starts off with John, a young 32-year-old stockbroker, and his wife Amy, an interior designer with a degree from Princeton. It opens up this chapter. They're walking down their driveway into their 2-story colonial in downtown Boston. And the book continues for another 244 pages and occurs over a 5-month period. But when you get to the bottom of page 1, how old is the storyline? It depends. To the author, thinks that for the sake of this story, it is a few seconds old. But in truth, both John and Amy have a few decades behind them. The fact that they were born, grew up, went to school, met each other, then married, and bought a house are all relevant parts of the story. But those details are placed throughout the following pages as the author deems necessary for the narrative. Sometimes you get those details and understand how they tie into the story, and sometimes they remain a mystery. But although the characters are 32 years old, the story is only a few seconds old at that particular point. These two characters have a long and detailed history, but the book doesn't actually begin until the author chooses to lift the curtain as they walk up the driveway of their new home in downtown Boston. Taking this story, taking this analogy or metaphor, so too when God created the world, He slowly lifted the curtain over 6 days to reveal a rich and complete world with a long history and much planning that had went into every single detail. And in that storyline that pre-existed, there were dinosaurs, trees with rings, the animals maturing, the continents shifting, people growing up, and light traveling great distances across the galaxies. And at the right moment, now, this year, exactly 5,779 years ago, God opens up the book to page 1. A perspective, my friends. The Torah opens up in the middle of a story, welcoming us, the creation of the world, revealing to us what pre-existed. If you look at Rashi, that's exactly how things happened. Everything was kind of under the surface. God made it to rain, and everything started to bloom, but it bloomed complete. Adam and Eve were actually 20 years old. They were mature young people, created that way. The world was created with an old feeling, an old foundation, with old carbon-14, insights and genes and everything else that goes with it. So, dear friends, Don't ever be taken back